Welcome to Unmuzzled Chat. I just feel giggly today. I feel like laughing. You know, this is a big blessing for me. I'm having some breakthrough. I feel Lyme disease. We're having some awesome breakthroughs, but it's bigger than even Lyme disease. And that's why I want to sound the bullhorn on how important it is we all up the quality of we all up our health to up the quality of life. And that is a battle we all should be engaged in. Very worthwhile. Well, I'm psyched about today. And let's go. Let's go, Brandon. Let's freaking go. I want to rip the lid off of some things here regarding the lies, the deceit, the manipulation, the gaslighting, all designed solely to confuse, divide, control, steal our freaking freedoms, folks. I want this episode to be all we need to know. Exposing evil and all the corruption and war tactics. Not all the war tactics, but just enough of the tactics they're using to just keep us in that freaking box. The truth will set us free. Let's break out of this box. And it's wild how they've overextended their hand in this information age. And they're losing, their control is crumbling. That's why they're fighting so hard right now to keep people out of the know. You out of the know. It's insane how much censorship we've even faced since kicking off this platform. And it seems as though it's getting ramped up. They're disappearing folks. They're locking up actual journalists. They're doing everything they can, sending their FBI hounds even to, women TikTokers' homes and men, other men exposing these same things. We're not to fear them. Heck, like I was touching on the other day, when you have spiritual breakthrough and kind of just mature growth, like, it's interesting how things shift. You no longer fear mortal death. I mean, you'll fight tooth and nail for your mortal life, right? But there's a big shift when you genuinely value like spiritual death in life over mortal death in life. It's a beautiful place to be. But as we expose all of this, it's important. It's so important so we can simply acknowledge that we are at war. And somehow, some way, light the fire within us to engage, fight back, protect our loved ones, our neighbors, all of God's children. Like from here on out. And lead to truth. That is what's going to set us free. Now, right before we dive in, I do want this solely to be all we need. All we need to know. And I believe we got some heavy hitting, very exposing clips and information to go through today. But I just want to take a minute and express gratitude. I want to express gratitude to Rumble and all these free speech platforms. It's interesting. Even posting on X and reposting a lot of this content, I'm continually getting the alerts of like fact checks and trying to manipulate people away from essentially using your own discernment and questioning things. And that happens on YouTube and Rumble and Facebook. I mean, it's wild. the lengths they're going to affect our wiring, folks, and our brain, our thought processes, just the information as a whole. And they're scrambling. I'm grateful for this opportunity to sit in front of you guys and utilize this First Amendment. Just free speech. That's essentially what this whole episode is like, wrapping around. Like, we're really just trying to hone in on the importance of free speech. We got to be allowed to be wrong and just everything. I'm having breakthrough, even though I'm still picking up pieces. I'm still in the midst of the battle with Lyme. What a breath of fresh air that, like, natural function and normal things are actually starting to feel normal. Golly, my heart goes out to those that are depressed, not unfunctional, whatever, long haulers, or they're continually poisoning themselves, not even realizing they're doing it with the fast foods and the water and all these things, even relying on pharmaceuticals and too blindly entrusting in white lab coats. Can we all take a second and just say it is healthy to question things? It is healthy to question everything. We must get back to that. And at this point, don't take my word for it. Don't take anyone's word for it. Just do your own research. Your life depends on it. Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, on everything. And seeking all of that's fulfilling the very essence as to, like, why we're here. Don't let anyone put you in freaking a box and tell you. So, I don't know if you guys like this shirt. It's awful red. I think it's even coming off even more bright red in this with the lighting in here. But I love this Disobey with the 1776. Represent. Black Eagle Apparel. Man. And I actually tried calling Alex, the owner, right before this episode. Busy, man. Didn't get through. But I'm going to find out for you guys. But this is a lighter, like, more breathable material. And I freaking love it. Even the way it fits, even though the other best dang freaking tee out there seems to have a little more length in the midsection and everything. I just freaking love it. So I want to find out if they fully transitioned into that, or whether you could choose between the thicker materialed shirt or this lighter one. I'll find out. But go check out Black Eagle Apparel, folks. And speaking of Black Eagle Apparel, we are going to be doing this hat giveaway by this. Are we Friday? I apologize. See, I'm still picking up pieces. So a week from today, we'll be giving this away, folks. So stay tuned at random. One of these episodes. Okay. There's so much gratitude I want to express in thanks that I can make a whole episode based on that alone, because there was legitimate a point, maybe even had to do with the motivational music I was listening to at the gym today, but I got emotional I was just so grateful for this breakthrough. The fact, like, I had enjoyment in the moments of life itself. It's absolutely crucial. So I'm going to challenge anyone, if there's anything weighing you down, like, let's just clean up. Let's look into some things that we've gone over, detoxifying, all these other things. And then to my Lyme community, or anyone even struggling with depression, other like heavy things, long haulers, there's some products I'm going to be plugging and connecting. I'm still building up the testimony, my personal testimony and story, like experiment with these products that I feel personally are directly correlating to this breakthrough. And I can't wait to share that information with you guys, and solely in hopes that it will help you have breakthrough as well. So please stay tuned. But let's dive in, shall we? Let's expose this evil corruption and everything they've done for a long time now to instill a structure of control and manipulation. It is wild. It's bonkers. But what a beautiful moment in time we live in to expose this and see this and be like, wow. Wow. Let's tear this down. This is unacceptable. And we could rebuild such a beautiful... I'm just so excited. Okay, so with that, let's dive into this Stu Peters. And once again, just know I'm going to add all the links into the episode if you want to watch them in their entirety. I mean, that's amazing. And it's insane, this first one from Stu. Like, it's crazy that he's getting these labels. He's getting truth out there enough to a point, even though he doesn't use his Facebook account for any of his promotional whatever. He solely kept that just, to post family pictures and use it for like normal use for family. They ban his account because the impact he's having in the world, nothing related to even the posts he has on that particular profile. What tyranny. It exposes a lot. All right. Some of this may seem repetitive, folk, but we're going to hear it from many different sources. There's a lot of different receipts. Nothing conspiratorial about this. Let's go.
Hi from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Good evening and welcome to the Stu Peters Show. In many totalitarian states or third world dictatorships, the flow of information is directly and admittedly controlled by a small group of people in the upper echelons of the government. This is the news that you get. This is state-controlled media. Everybody knows that. Now, of course, these people that are running the news, they're not elected. They're usually partisan apparatchiks. They're put in their positions to carry out the agenda of whatever political or military machine is in control of that particular country at that particular time. But here in America, in the free United States of America, we're told from a very early age that one of the greatest, if not the greatest thing about this country is our free press. We're told that our media is not controlled by the government and that we have many different sources that we can go to, many different organizations and reporters, TV and radio programs that we can go to get a wide offering of news and other information that we need to know to be educated and be contributing citizens of society. At least that's how things were supposed to be.
Right.
But instead of a free press, instead of the free flow of information in the sort of open source news ecosystem that would be possible if the constitutional republic we're told about actually existed, instead of a robust and independent media that holds the powerful accountable, we just have a dolled up version of a state-run totalitarian media system. But actually, it's even worse than that. Because it's not just our government that has influence and control over American media. No, it's individuals and entities from all over the world. Now, of course, the media is not bragging about this. No, they don't like to admit it, but anyone who's done any research at all knows this to be true. The media in this country is owned and operated by just a handful of corporations. Just a handful of powerful cosmopolitan globalists, and they control almost all of the information that we receive, especially when it comes to news about politics and functions of government. In fact, it's only just 6 corporations that control roughly 90% of media in the United States. Did you know that? AT&T, CBS, Comcast, Disney, News Corp, and Viacom.
Wow.
And those 6 corporations are really just 5 because CBS and Viacom are joined at the hip. And so in turn, through this small number of corporations, all deeply in bed with the federal government and globalist NGOs and a litany of other corporations controlling tech and medicine and social media and so much more, nearly all of the news and entertainment and culture that we consume, be it politics or sports, movies, music, whatever TV show is the viral binge watch of the month, almost all of it goes through these corporations and their many tentacles. Now,
such a good point. I mean, I literally was talking to a couple of my friends this while back. Like, we kind of all got into that whole Survivor show together, and we just had a moment last night talking about this new season or whatnot, and we're like, I'm so grateful that we understand what is going on here and how that very show has been manipulative and serving a purpose since its conception, since its first episode, its first season, and manipulating and building out. I mean, look how far back it dates. And you could look at the percentages of populace and population and the type of characters the percentages they're having of their contestants, and it's just no secret. It doesn't even come close to like natural selection. They're pedestaling and influencing and victimizing, and it's with the sounds, that just everything, as you look at it all, it just becomes very telling. But it's just one dang show, but it's all been controlled, all of it. The freaking NFL is not a sport. We could pull it up. They're registered as entertainment, folks. Entertainment. It's not a sport. It's not what you think it is. And yes, that has been a huge part of the issue in a sense, because it's kept people from focusing on real issues at hand. And if we annihilated those issues and turn the NFL into an actual sport minus the corruption, then it could be an amazing, wholesome, beautiful thing to engage in, participate, support even. Regardless if you even know anyone personally involved in it, and you just like colors and images, and I mean, and you got to be leery, because at what point is there a level of false idolship involved with that distracts you from, once again, fulfilling your purpose here in life? Because some people will go so over the top with false idolship, they'll idol a sports team more daily or yearly, monthly, than God himself. And I'm not sitting here judging. It's not my place. My heart goes out because I've been there where I didn't open the door to God in this way, and all these great blessings and breakthroughs are happening in my life where I'm just so grateful. So my heart goes out to those individuals, because I know, like, they've been preyed on, and effectively are getting wrapped up in intentional corrupt things that is keeping them in that door closed to their detriment, and they're not maximizing their time here and walking in this beautiful light. It's essentially a part of that box. All right, I digress. Let's play a little more of Stu here.
They could easily be broken up under antitrust laws. Many people called for President Trump to do just that. But they're one with Washington, so that'll likely never happen. And money aside, both sides have each other compromised. So while nearly every major media outlet that's on the air will claim to be a collective of independent-minded journalists working to bring meaningful stories to people, in reality, they're almost always doing the bidding of a much larger sadistic group of parasites. But still, they'll look you right in your face, and they'll tell you that they're bringing you fair and balanced news.
Right.
And many of their sleepwalking viewers will believe them. But there is, however, one media organization that everyone seems to agree is run by the government and living off the people, and that's NPR. Though they'll tell you they're as legitimate news outlet as anyone else. They even quit X over being labeled state-funded media, which they are. NPR likes to portray itself, and it's often seen as this benign, policy-oriented news source. It's bland, it's drab, it's about as boring as a radio network or a news website as you could possibly find. But recently, we've learned that NPR, the state-funded media apparatus of our federal government under CEO Catherine Maher, is actively censoring and sacking employees who object to what one now former NPR objector named Uri Berliner called a rampant left-wing bias.
Folks, it's hard to even stop because I mean, this particular episode's 56 minutes, but it's amazing. So you want to watch it in its entirety, click in the link below. But let's move on because there's more to uncover. All right, this dives in. This shows it that the Rothschilds own the media. It's a bit more lengthy, but I believe it's worth playing this one in its entirety. Bring the meaning into this is why free speech is so important.
The advertising world of picture television brings us the news of the world through two central news agencies called Reuters and the Associated Press. The Rothschilds bought Reuters in the 1800s, which later bought the Associated Press and made the Rothschild family owners of the world's largest central news services. To the present day, the world depends on these Rothschild-owned central news services as their main source of news and information. In his book called Who Owns the TV Networks, author Eustace Mullins claims that the major TV networks, radio stations, newspapers, and publishing empires are controlled by the Rothschild, Rockefeller, and J.P. Morgan money cartels through their corporate conglomerates. The bankster-owned media conglomerates include weapons manufacturers General Electric and Westinghouse, which profit from promoting wars. Control over the internet, publishing, recording, and top cable companies can be traced back to the same Big Five media empires: General Electric, Time Warner, Viacom, Disney, and News Corp. These media monopolies are owned directly or indirectly by the Rothschild, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, and Oppenheimer Brotherhood. Yes, there are now more stations and more media voices, but they're all coming from the same ventriloquist. Every TV show needs corporate sponsors, and corporate sponsors sponsor pro-business, pro-government programming, and journalists who support the agenda of the Big Five media owners. While two-thirds of the world goes hungry, these banksters offer gazillion-dollar sponsorships to sports athletes to play with their balls. Why? Because they keep the masses distracted from the important issues.
Boom. Even the local news is scripted.
And welcome back to the show. I scream, you scream. You know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest.
I scream.
Who in their right mind would listen to these buffoons? Who? These are different agencies. Supposedly, I mean, you got the... Oh, we got this free source, right? Like Stu was just talking about and exposing. CNN's supposed to be this left and Fox is supposed to be the right, so we have options. But the talking heads are all saying the same things, given the same script. It's controlled. Who in their right mind would tune into these?
You scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, we all know the rest. I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
If you know anyone that is, send them this episode. Send them this episode. This is... ugh. And with love. We want to help people break out truth out of their box and see truth so they are set free. Otherwise, we're only going to know what they want us to know. They could direct and manipulate us into volunteering our bodies to experimental things. manipulating us into politically leaning one way or another, creating division amongst the people. I mean, heck, even manipulating us, to eat and just not take care of ourselves. It's dangerous.
I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby. Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
Myers.
A child's happiness is priceless, especially on a birthday.
A child's happiness is priceless, especially on a birthday.
Especially on a birthday.
First, the severe.
They also keep the public in a state of perpetual... it's cut off. I can't even see it. Perpetual something not good, I'm sure.
Severe flooding here in the Northeast as more rain continues to fall today. NBC's Michelle Kaczynski, I guess she's in Canoe, is in Wayne, New Jersey this morning. Michelle, good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, obviously we're getting a nice break from the rain, but not the flooding. This is essentially now a part of the Passaic River in this neighborhood. It rushed in yesterday.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's hilarious.
I just got a picture of the conditions that Kayla Brown has been living in for the past 2 months. Essentially, she was by the deck inside of what would look like a steel cage, roughly 4 by 4 by 6, and that steel cage was then inside of a larger container. Now, a massive search is underway in this field behind me because the victim herself told police that she believes as many as 4 bodies may be buried here. George?
Let's go.
An ABC News producer is being investigated by the network after reported evidence that a live camera shot on Good Morning America was doctored by falsely stringing police tape in the background. The shot featured reporter Lindsay Davis in Woodruff, South Carolina, where a woman was allegedly held captive in a storage container by a registered sex offender. Behind Davis, yellow police tape can be seen with the words, "Sheriff's Line, do not cross." A wider photograph of the scene shows that police tape was actually just attached to some ABC camera equipment to enhance the scene.
Dateline NBC, a primetime news program, airs a story in 1992 entitled Waiting to Explode. The story includes footage demonstrating that a line of trucks produced by General Motors readily explode on impact.
To see for ourselves what might happen in a side impact crash, Dateline NBC hired the Institute for Safety Analysis to conduct crash demonstrations. Unlike GM tests, the fuel tanks were filled with real gasoline. Look what happened. At impact, a small hole was punctured in the tank. According to our experts, the pressure of the collision and the crushing of the gas tank forced gasoline to spew from the gas cap. The fuel then erupted into flames when ignited by the impacting car's headlight.
After the program airs, one of the firemen at the taping of the crash contacts GM. The conversation inspires a full-scale investigation. 3 months later, NBC is forced to reveal their role in fabricating the news.
NBC's contractor did put incendiary devices under the trucks to ensure that there would be a fire if gasoline were released from the truck's gas tank.
We said the crash, quote, forced gasoline to spew from the fuel cap.
What a
end quote.
circus.
GM says since the gas cap was the wrong cap for the GM filler tube, and because the gas tank was overfilled, the cap came off when the impact occurred.
We agree with GM that we should have told our viewers about these devices.
The Dateline reporter, however, said, quote, at impact,
We
a
have
small
been
hole was
living
punctured
in the
tank,
Matrix,
unquote.
I
GM
tell
has
ya.
now x-rayed that tank and found no hole.
We acknowledge the placing of the incendiary devices under the truck was a bad idea from start to finish.
That's our new policy, and we'll be right back.
Look at the pyramid. In the first couple layers, the really eager, hard-working young journalists are out there trying to get the stories, trying to make a name so they can move up that pyramid. Well, the further they move up the pyramid, the more they realize that, the outlets really aren't interested in major news that rocks the boat.
The boat Charles refers to belongs to those at the top of the pyramid, where the interests of the media outlets are quietly defined. The year is 1917, and Representative Oscar Callaway enters a disturbing statement into the U.S. congressional record. The statement reveals why J.P. Morgan interests hired 12 high-ranking news managers. The 12 were asked to determine the most influential newspapers in America. They were to figure out how many news organizations it would take to control generally the policy of the daily press of the United States. The 12 found it was only necessary to purchase the control of 25 of the greatest papers. An agreement was reached. The policy of the papers was bought, and an editor was placed at each paper to ensure that all published information was in keeping with the new policy.
Wow.
Soon, that policy would be defined by a front group formed by J.P. Morgan and his colleagues. In fact, Morgan's personal attorney was founding president of the organization, the Council on Foreign Relations.
We haven't even been free in our own bodies and minds. We've been manipulated.
Today, the CFR maintains that its goal is to increase America's understanding of the world. However, the actual objective of this highly exclusive club is revealed by the rare admissions of the insiders themselves. In the early 60s, a Georgetown University professor collects information for a book favorable to the network of powerful men who founded the CFR. For 2 years, Professor Carroll Quigley is allowed to examine the confidential papers and secret records of this network.
Just you
Quigley
wait,
reveals
folks.
that these men aim to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. In short, they seek total and quiet control of the entire world. And the CFR is their most visible conduit for carrying out that agenda. CFR members include America's wealthiest tycoons, as well as the highly placed elite in government, academic institutions, tax-exempt foundations, and the establishment media. Ruling Class Journalists, written by Richard Harwood, describes the CFR membership as the ruling establishment in the United States. The Washington Post article boasted that news reporters who are CFR members do not merely analyze and interpret foreign policy for the United States, they help make it. Who are these policymakers? Many of their faces are familiar. NBC's Tom Brokaw, CBS's Dan Rather, ABC's Barbara Walters, Jim Lehrer of PBS, William F. Buckley of National Review, media mogul Rupert Murdoch, owner of the giant multifaceted News Corporation. These media heavyweights, and many others like them, are members of the CFR. Powerful corporations are also invited to become members. At the close of the 20th century,
tear it all
CFR
down,
influence
y'all.
presided over far-reaching consolidations of media control. In 1995, CFR members Michael Eisner of Disney and ABC's Thomas Murphy merged their media empires. Soon after the merger, the Disney-ABC empire becomes a CFR corporate member. In the year 2000, the world's largest internet service provider, America Online, joins forces with Time Warner, one of the world's largest news organizations. The CEOs favoring the move are CNN's Thomas Johnson and Time Warner's Gerald Levin, both CFR members. Once again, another media giant is created under the shadow of CFR influence. Today, an elite handful of individuals define the agendas that are supported by the empire of establishment news.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
Wow, right? All right, let's continue on. Let's hear from Tucker. Now, this is an hour long. We'll just play a couple minutes. Yeah, 2 minutes. But it is labeled Andrew Tate states, "This is the most important video you will ever watch." I mean, it is pretty darn good.
The defining fact of the United States is freedom of speech. To the extent this country is actually exceptional, it's because we have the First Amendment to the Bill of Rights. We have freedom of conscience. We can say what we really think. There's no hate speech exception to that.
Well, here we are. Is what it is. It's not something ideally to do, but it must be done. Because the reality of this platform, Unmuzzled Chat, we are not going to conform and fall in line and be cowards to tyrannical platforms. So I'm so sorry to disrupt this episode. This is specifically for the YouTube crowd. An opportunity. We'd like to extend an invitation yet again to Rumble, a free speech platform. Come join us. We don't care your political views. We don't care your origins, all that freaking stats or whatever you want to freaking call it. Come join us. Have the conversations. View this episode and all further content in its entirety. There are bombshell episodes like probably this one. You need to check this one and others out on Rumble. It's no secret. YouTube now has shown its colors. Freaking Nazi platform trying to control information, withhold information that could save lives. 100%. They don't care about you. They care about their funders and appeasing them. It's sad, but it just is the way it is. And I just sure hope through what I've even dealt with here, and many other patriots and many other people using this platform for truthful information and have been censored. It's just, when is enough? Okay? Let's stand strong now. Come join us. There's amazing content. We're going to get to the bottom of things. We want to find out what in fact is truthful and helpful for our mental states, our physical states, just our well-being in general. And we can't do it on this platform, unfortunately. Now, there's been whispers that maybe Elon will buy the YouTube, buy Facebook, and liberate it, similar to what has taken place on X, formerly known as Twitter. Is it perfect? Is everything perfect? No. But we, the people, can support the ones on our behalf, like just by our views, clicks, likes, and we must stand strong on this. I sure hope you see the level of importance here and that we can unite. Let's create this community. Join us. Come on the podcast. Comment. Let's get things rocking and rolling. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you over there. God bless you.